Hi, I am back in London. I have a new house sit situation and a new pet. This is Frankie. He's about 8 months old and he is a menace. I'll insert a picture of what he did immediately upon my arrival. But yeah, got lots to talk about. So I had an idea for a video. Baby, that's my foot. That kind of came about because Jan Agaton and Riley Marie both posted back-to-back vlogs where they read their first 5-star read. And I thought it would be fun to read my favorite YouTubers' first 5-star reads of the year to see if any of them could be 5-star for me. So I just finished Riley Marie's first 5-star read of the year, and that was Savor It by DeWitt.
I finished, it is 5-star. Oh my god, is this my first 5-star book this year? Oh my god, this is my first 5-star book this year.
I'm not usually a huge romance reader. Actually, I'm kind of a certified romance hater, so I wasn't expecting much from this because it's a contemporary romance without any other genre. I think I've only ever read one 5-star romance for me, and that was The Very Irregular Society of Witches, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches? The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, I think. The Very Irregular Secret Society of Witches. Something like that. And I loved that book, but a lot of it was because of the magic and kind of the found family aspect rather than the romance. I did enjoy the romance, but that definitely wasn't the number one thing that really excited me about the book. I don't know what this lighting situation is doing, so forgive me. I don't know if it's better to no, that feels too bright. Okay, we're just gonna stick with this. I didn't have very high expectations for this book, and I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would. I ended up reading it exclusively on audio because that's what came in at my library. And I really recommend that. The audiobook was really well done. They have a different voice actor for the main female character and the main male character. And I thought that they did a really good job of voice acting. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, so what is this book about? This book is about Sage and Fisher. Sage lives in this town called Spoons, across from a house that her neighbors rent out every summer. And Fisher and his niece end up renting the house for the summer because Fisher is a former Michelin star chef who got fired and is now being sent by his old boss to kind of help open up the restaurant in Spoons to, I guess, kind of prove himself and see if he can get his job back. He's moving from New York and has a pretty strong vendetta against small towns because of his history, and Sage really loves her small town. She has no desire to leave it. So that kind of becomes the crux of the issue in their relationship. And I really loved their communication. Every time I was afraid that a miscommunication was gonna become a major obstacle in their relationship, they solved it about 2 pages later, and it felt very mature, which, you should expect from 2 people in their, I think, early 30s, but I often find that's not how it goes in romance books. Also, the plot deals with grief a lot. Sage is an orphan. She's been orphaned since she was 12, and Fisher lost his sister in a car accident, which is why he has custody of his niece. I really enjoyed not only the relationship between Sage and Fisher, but also the relationship that develops between Sage and Indy, Fisher's niece, and also the development of the relationship between Fisher and Indy. The book was pretty full of a lot of things that you would expect from a small town romance. Sage was quirky and optimistic, and Fisher was grumpy and annoyed to have to deal with all the small town busybodies that were interested in why he was there. And, Sage has a goose and a 3-legged cat, but although I feel like it was full of cliches, they weren't tired. And maybe it's because I haven't read a lot of romances, but it didn't distract from the story too much for me. The thing that I liked the most was that the conflict wasn't derived from miscommunication or something that would be easy to overlook. It came from a fundamental difference in their circumstances and wanting to make sure that neither of them were losing anything or sacrificing any of their dreams or desires for the other person. Yeah, so I ended up giving this between 3.5 and 4 stars. I think I'm gonna round it up to a 4 on Goodreads, although probably in reality it's more like a 3.75. But that was my first book that I read for this reading YouTubers' first 5-star reads of the year vlog. The other ones that I'm thinking about reading right now are The Gathering, which was Jan's first 5-star read of the year. If I can get my hands on Ministry of Time, I'll read that, which was Sid Bookworm's first 5-star read of the year, but the library has a really long hold on that, and I'm looking forward to the next ones. Hi, it's a little later And there were two things that I forgot to mention about Savor It. The first one is that there were two side characters in this that were mentioned a few times, that it was pretty obvious that they were being set up to have a book, and I just saw that DeWitt has their story coming out in, I think, May of this year. So I've put that on my want to read list, which is pretty big for a romance. Also, something that I liked about Savor It was that the smut wasn't too much. I'm not a huge fan of reading sex scenes. They just don't do it for me, and I usually find them cringy rather than romantic. But although this book had some, they were all pretty short and concise, and there were no weird nicknames that I remember hearing for either of the main characters or any of their body parts. So that's always good. And I was just watching Alexis Fully Booked and catching up on her videos, and I was watching her Jante's Inferno vlog, and she also talks about her first 5-star of the year in that, and that was also The Ministry of Time. So now I feel like I kind of have to read The Ministry of Time, and I was thinking about either getting it on my Kindle or through Audible or something so I don't have to wait, because I just checked the wait time and it's supposed to be 16 weeks from my library, so I don't think that's gonna work for me. Yeah, so that's definitely on the docket.
Penguin Random House Audio presents The Gathering by C.J. Tudor. Read for you by Lorelei King.
The second book that I've started for YouTubers' first 5 stars of the year is The Gathering by C.J. Tudor. And I'm reading this because it was Jan Agaton's first 5-star of the year.
Yeah, 5 stars. I have that giddy feeling. The vampire vibes were perfect.
I've already started this, and I'd say I'm like 15-20% of the way in, and I'm really interested so far. It is about a detective named Barbara, and she's a vampire anthropologist. Basically, she's a detective that specializes in looking into supposed murders by vampires to make sure it's actually what it appears to be. Because in this version of our world, it is in our world, but vampires are an established creature. They were hunted for many years and then became protected under some protection act by the United States. So Barbara has been sent to this very small Alaskan town where a boy was just murdered. And the townsfolk believe that he was murdered by a vampire from the colony that lives near their town. There's huge tension between the town and the colony because of past incidents, and a lot of the townspeople are very prejudiced against vampires and think that all vampires should be wiped out. And Barbara's job is to go to this town and investigate the crime to find out what really happened, because the town is calling for a cull, which basically means that they go and wipe out a colony. And it can be legally sanctioned, but it's very hard to get it legally sanctioned, and the town wants to do this. Barbara's job is to make sure that it isn't done illegally. I assume the rest of the book is going to be her finding out that the murder wasn't as straightforward as it seems. We're already getting hints of that, and it's also her interacting with these townspeople, the mayor and the chief of police and the parents and friends and teachers of this boy who was murdered. I'm really liking it so far. I feel like I'm frustrated because she obviously knows what she's talking about, and she's getting a lot of pushback from the people in the town who really only have their experience, not an actual background in vampire anthropology, which is understandable because they believe that a terrible creature has murdered a young boy in their town and they want revenge, but they're not really letting her do her job, which is frustrating. It's really interesting so far. I'm excited to learn more about the vampires. We're already getting little tidbits sprinkled in about vampire history, but also their physiology, what kind of creature they are, how they're different than the myths and the legends, and how they're the same. So far I'm really liking it. I have read one C.J. Tudor book before. I read The Drift by C.J. Tudor, which was kind of similar to this in the sense that it was a twist on a zombie story. So this is a twist on a vampire story. That was a twist on a zombie story. And she takes these creatures that you know so much about from pop culture and from media, and doesn't completely change what they are, but goes into more detail about them and kind of humanizes them and explains where they came from. And it's really interesting so far. Also, The Drift focused on the snow a lot, and we're in Alaska in The Gathering, so that's a similarity. I'm having trouble differentiating all the different names of people so far, so I need to concentrate a little bit more on that, but so far I'm liking it. Okay, also I forgot to mention that I just moved into a new apartment, hence why the room looks really drab and completely undecorated and kind of messy. I literally just moved in yesterday. So I said goodbye to Frankie, unfortunately, but I am gonna see him again in April for another little like weekend house sit. But yeah, back to no pets in my life, which is kind of sad. Okay, this is kind of a weird angle, but I'm feeling a little under the weather, so this is what we're gonna get. I'm now about 75% of the way into The Gathering, and I'm still really liking it. It's still feeling like a high 4-star. At this point, things are unraveling. There's not a lot I can say that isn't a spoiler at this point, but throughout the whole story, we've been jumping perspectives to all these different characters, and you don't know their relevance or how they connect to each other, and now things are starting to come together, which is always my favorite part of books like this. A book that I really, really enjoyed was Disappearing Earth, and it has a little bit of a similar setup in that each part is from the perspective of a different person, and then in the very end, it all starts to come together and connect. And I was so excited to see where the connection between each character was. That was set in, I believe it was Kamchatka, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is a Siberian peninsula, and the population of that town, this is now a tangent and has nothing to do with anything I'm reading, but I liked that book, so I'm going to tell you about it. That book explored how Indigenous women versus Russian women in that town were treated, and it all hinged on the disappearance of these 2 Russian girls, and then years ago the disappearance of an Indigenous girl and how those cases were treated differently. And I do feel like that relates a little bit to The Gathering, because The Gathering really does explore the idea of who is Indigenous to land and what to do in situations where multiple people try to lay claim to the same piece of land or feel like their home is in the same area but they can't coexist. So long story short, I'm still really enjoying this book. I think I'll probably finish it today, probably a little bit at work on my break, and then also when I get home, or like when I'm walking to work, which I have to leave for in about 10 minutes. Yeah, so far so good with this vlog concept. When I'm finished with this, I'm gonna start The Ministry of Time. I have that on audiobook and my Kindle. I think my mom is actually listening to it right now, so I'm gonna wait for her to finish, and I'm gonna remind her not to return it to the library because the wait list on that was so long. But yeah. That's the plan. So I started The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley today, and I don't think I actually ever filmed a final update for The Gathering, but I did finish The Gathering, and I ended up giving it 4 stars just like I expected. It was a very solid 4. I liked the conclusion. There were several twists towards the very end, all the way up until the last page, and a few of them I guessed, more so the smaller ones, and maybe that was strategic to kind of take away focus from the main mystery so that we didn't figure that out, because who or what actually did the killing was a surprise to me at the end. I felt like the end moved a bit quickly though. After the dramatic conclusion, everything just wrapped up very quickly, which I guess is kind of the point, but I think I would have liked to see the aftermath a little bit more. My favorite part was learning about Barbara's backstory and her connection to vampires. I think CJ Tudor could have taken it even further in some aspects, but overall, it was pretty successful. It was a 4-star. It's definitely an author I'm going to continue to read from, because now there are 2 of her books that I've given 4 stars and I've been really engrossed with the entire time I was reading. Maybe I would have liked it even more if I was reading it physically, so maybe her next book I'll pick up physically, because I did read The Drift physically, and even though The Drift was a little bit more confusing in terms of timeline, I think I had a firmer grasp on what was going on and who everybody was. But yeah, so 4 stars to The Gathering, and now on to Ministry of Time.
Guys, I am completely in love with this book. I'm completely in love with this book. Easy 5 stars, 6 stars even, mayhaps. And that makes me...
I finished. We finally did it. I think I finally have my first 5-star read of 2025.
I found out that it wasn't actually my mom who was reading Ministry of Time, it was my dad. So that's a fun little twist. And I asked him how he liked it, and he said he really loved it and thinks that I will too. So now I'm even more excited to read The Ministry of Time, because I don't get recommendations from my dad that often, and so knowing that he really liked it, I think I will too. And I'm already really liking it. I'm about 20% of the way in so far, and we've been introduced to what seems like the 2 main characters. So from my understanding, Ministry of Time is set in our current day in England, and the government has found a way to time travel. And what they're doing with this new technology is they're going into the past and bringing people from the past into our current timeline. They choose people who would have died in their timeline. They took someone out of World War I, they took someone out of some epidemic that was happening, and they saved our main male character, Commander Gore, from a doomed Arctic expedition. And the Ministry of Time, which is what this government agency is called, calls the people that they take to the present day expats. Each expat is paired with a bridge. A bridge is someone who works within the ministry, and they are tasked with making sure the expats assimilate. Basically, they say that they have to take care of their mental and physical well-being. So during this experiment, they live with the expats, they take the expats to all of their appointments, they basically do everything with them and monitor them. Commander Gore and our main female character, whose name I do not remember, I don't even know if it's been said, I'm sure it's been said, but I really like their dynamic. I like each of them individually and their motivations. I am enjoying that we're getting some flashbacks to Commander Gore's past so that we can get to know him a little bit. Honestly, those are still a little confusing for me, so I don't think I'm gleaning as much from them as I should be, but I'm glad that they're there. It seems like a fair bit of time has passed already, at least a few months, and our main character is already kind of questioning what the goal of this project is. I think something we're going to see her struggle with is the question of what they're actually going to use this technology for if this experiment proves successful. I also think both main characters and all of the expats and bridges actually are going to have to face the consequences of taking someone out of time and how that affects their body and brain physically, not just their psychological state. Beyond that, both main characters already seem to have expressed some sort of interest in each other, even if it's just subconsciously, and I'm not hating that element. They both have very strong personalities, and it's sweet to see them interact, especially to see Commander Gore learn about his new environment and try to embrace this new place that he's living. Because although he's from England, the New England that he's living in is so different. You know, he's having to deal with living in super crowded cities and interact with technology he's never seen, like cars and telephones and Spotify, and also see the way that society has evolved. So he's now living in an integrated society. He's learning that the roles of women have really evolved from his time. And it's interesting to see how he copes and also how his bridge deals with his ignorance in a lot of ways. Part of why I like the romance, or where the romance is headed, is because I already like both main characters individually. Commander Gore is very charming, and I've enjoyed seeing how he turns to humor when things get uncomfortable, especially when other people are uncomfortable. And it's kind of his way of trying to make other people feel better. I also really like that our main female character, she is questioning the system that she's working within and also her own internal biases. And I like how that is causing her to question more and more her entire purpose within the Ministry of Time. Also, the writing is just very beautiful. It's lyrical and descriptive without being overwritten, and it's also very unique. It's describing feelings in a way that I've never heard them explained before, but are very tangible. So I'm really liking the writing, I'm liking the story so far, but I am getting a little lost with the flashbacks. But yeah, I'm excited to keep reading. I'm filming another little vlog project about running, and I'm trying to decide whether this is going to be my running audiobook, so I'm more excited to go on runs, but I honestly don't know if I'll be able to not listen to it when I'm not running. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, I realize that both the angle and the lighting are just getting more and more unhinged as we go along in this video, but I've decided I don't care because I finished the Ministry of Time earlier today and we finally got a 5-star. Yeah, like what can I even say about this? This book was delightfully mundane while also being so emotionally charged. The relationship between the main character and Commander Gore reminded me almost of the feeling I got when reading Divine Rivals for the first time. I didn't end up loving that book. I ended up actually giving it a 3.5 stars, but the first 90% felt very solidly like a 5-star to me, and a lot of that was because of the relationship. I think it had to do with the old-fashioned nature of, I guess, the courtship, because in Divine Rivals, although it's a fantasy world, it's very clearly inspired by the early 20th century. And although technically the Ministry of Time is set in our world in our time, the jumping back and forth between Gore's original timeline and the current day, as well as just the chaste way in which they interact really reminded me of Divine Rivals. They have a very similar way of writing about emotion, although I do think the Ministry of Time did it just a little bit better. And Kaliane Bradley would just use words in a way that I haven't seen in a really long time. I highlighted some of my favorite quotes. In one, the main character is talking about the way her and Gore were touching, and she said, "He was holding me in his arms the way that poems hold clauses." And that's so beautiful. She also talks about love and says, "If you ever fall in love, you'll be a person who is in love for the rest of your life." I understand not liking this book. There are long periods of time where nothing really seems to happen. And kind of like Becky Chambers, actually, there are also scenes that feel really important that are cut short, or things that are described after, like this thing happened that was important and you learn about it after the fact. But I kind of like that. It kind of elevates the mundane to be just as important as these life-changing moments. And the narrator talks about that. She talks about how a lot of what she's writing about, because this is a first-person account from her writing to someone, but she talks about how a lot of what she's writing about isn't important, but it felt so important that she had to write it, and to be able to understand her experience, those tiny moments of importance were just as vital as the main plot points. Yeah, so I really loved this book. I loved the characters, I loved their flaws and their charms and their strengths and their weaknesses, and I loved learning about their motivations. The twist at the end also surprised me. Maybe I just don't pay attention as well as I should, and I'm sure some people saw that coming, but the two main reveals at the end I didn't see coming. Not at all, actually. And I loved the note of melancholy throughout, because since the narrator is writing it knowing what happens at the end, it has an ominous tone, because she talks about how she'll look back on that moment and remember this thing, or if she had only known what would happen, she would have done something different. And I do really like that use of storytelling. And honestly, even more than the main characters, Arthur and Maggie really had my heart, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people felt the same way. So I guess this kind of wraps up this vlog. I thought it was very successful. I ended up reading Savor It for Riley Marie, giving that a high 3-star, 3.75. The Gathering for Jana Agaton, which I gave a 4-star. And The Ministry of Time for both Sid Bookworm and Alexis Fully Booked, and I'm giving that 5 stars as well. It wasn't my first 5-star of the year, but it's one that I'm definitely going to revisit, and it's the type of story that I would love to reread knowing what I know now. I also think that if you really loved This Is How You Lose the Time War, you would like The Ministry of Time. So that's a comparison that I would draw. So yeah, I'm sorry that the quality has just been deteriorating throughout this, but I didn't want to wait until tomorrow to film this. So thanks for taking the time, and thank you to Riley Marie, Jana Agaton, Sid Bookworm, and Alexis Fully Booked for the recommendations. If you think that I should read any other books based on YouTuber recommendations, let me know, and I'll see you next time.